Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the workshop, and thank you to Mary Beth and Timothy for presenting, and we'd love to hear your introductions and your information you have to share with us.
Very good. Welcome indeed. I am Timothy Dickey. I'm coming to you today from Columbus, Ohio, though I have lived in Western Massachusetts, still have some relatives in Fitchburg and actually in Bomoseen, Vermont, outside of Castleton, outside of Rutland. I'm currently the Adult Services Librarian, one of the Adult Services Librarians at the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Ohio. I teach library science in a number of online programs, but I'm also, fairly recently, I was a caregiver of someone living with dementia, a close family member, until October of 2018, and that was part of what got me onto this path.
My turn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Beth Riednor. I consider that my most important qualification to speak on the topic of dementia is that I was honored to be my husband Steve's caregiver through a 10-year journey with a rare young onset dementia called primary progressive aphasia, or PPA. It's through what we experienced together that I learned how much people living with dementia want to retain their identity, their dignity, and their independence, despite the inevitable progress of their disease. Steve was my best teacher about how it is still possible to live well despite having a dementia diagnosis. I retired from my position as university librarian for Roosevelt University in Chicago in 2008. And that is when I started offering a book and reading program as a volunteer in a local memory care facility. And that's how this Tales and Travel program that I started began. I'll tell you more about that program later. I've also been involved in the leadership team for the American Library Association's interest group for Alzheimer's and related dementias for 7 years, and I currently hold the position of chair. So Timothy was too modest to say this, but he is actually the author of a terrific new book entitled Library Dementia Services. It's the only comprehensive guide available to help libraries meet the needs of this population. His book is packed full of resources and scholarly references to almost every aspect of this topic that you can imagine. I would highly recommend its purchase by every library that's seriously interested in providing services to people living with dementia. It will save you a lot of time.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. And thank you again to all of you who are caring enough to attend today's program or to hear the recording. Since you chose this program, you're probably already aware of the global epidemic that is persons living with dementia. There are roughly 5.8 million older Americans living with Alzheimer's and related dementias today, 50 million worldwide, and there are new cases diagnosed every 3 seconds around the globe. You should also know that the umbrella term dementia encompasses a wide spectrum of symptoms and different kinds of dementias. And this is something that is highly individual in how it presents in any given case. There's no universal playbook to chart its development in human beings. Medical science has been able to find a number of genetic and lifestyle factors associated with dementia. However, despite millions of dollars and 50,000 research papers published on the topic each year, we have no effective pharmacological treatment whatsoever. We can slow the progress, but we can't reverse or cure the disease with pharmacology. There are 3 generally accepted stages in the progress of especially Alzheimer's dementia, though the transitions between the stages will be highly individual. There's a stage known as mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, which may be a precursor to Alzheimer's or other dementias, or may manifest on its own. This is a kind of cognitive impairment usually noticeable to friends and family members, but one that does not get in the way of everyday tasks of life, and thus could be something with people coming into your libraries very easily. There's also a preclinical stage which may last up to 20 years in some cases prior to symptoms. Mild dementia, mild Alzheimer's dementia, is the early stage when a person can function independently, though in most cases, friends and family members are beginning to notice more significant changes. Some common difficulties might include problems coming up with the right word or name, trouble remembering names when introduced to new people, challenges performing tasks in social or work settings, forgetting material that one has just read, and losing or misplacing valuable objects. There's a moderate or middle stage um, when someone living with dementia is experiencing symptoms that are probably becoming more evident to most everyone and can include forgetfulness about one's own personal history, can involve personality or behavioral changes, feeling moody or withdrawn in socially or mentally challenging situations, can include confusion about where they are or what day it is, as well as an increased risk of wandering and becoming lost. These, again, are going to be highly individualized and not something that we need to treat with any stigma just to be looking for, because these might be people, again, coming into your library. Late stage or severe Alzheimer's dementia is when cognitive skills are worsening even further, and these individuals are more likely to need round-the-clock assistance with daily activities and personal care. You're probably only seeing those individuals if you are a caregiver or if you are involved in outreach programs. There are 10 warning signs overall, commonly recognized. These have been put forth by the Alzheimer's Association and others as potential signs of developing dementia, especially when more than one on this list is present, or when these are more severe than normal age-related changes in cognition. We all grow old. Memory loss, for instance, that's the first sign of dementia, but it's also something that just decreases for all of us as we become older. When someone forgets a name or an appointment, but recalls it later, that's normal age-related changes in our cognition. But when memory loss starts disrupting daily life, when people are completely forgetting names and events or showing an inability to lodge new information in the brain, they're using memory aids or family members to get through everyday tasks, this might be a warning sign of developing dementia. Again, some of the others on the list, if they start disrupting daily life. Number 5, spatial-visual difficulty. If someone is having difficulty reading, seeing colors, or driving, that could be a difficulty with the eyes, and that needs to be ruled out, or it could be associated with different kinds of dementia. Problems with words, struggling with vocabulary, or missing the meanings of common words with regularity could be a warning sign. Decreased judgment with grooming or judgment with money, changes in mood and personality may manifest as warning signs as well. How does this look in the Green Mountain State? You actually have roughly 10 times the diagnosed cases of Alzheimer's and related dementia as you do of COVID-19 right now. You have about 13,000 this year out of your population of 600,000, and it's estimated that that will rise to around 17,000 total cases in the next 5 years, a pretty steep increase. Vermont's mortality rate due to Alzheimer's and related dementias is also well above the national average. You might also be interested to know that 81% of people with dementia are still living in the community, with only 19% estimated to be living in residential care settings or nursing homes. These persons who are living with dementia are walking through the doors of your library every day. And it's also reported that there are 3 unpaid caregivers, usually family members on average, for each diagnosed person with dementia. That makes probably around 40,000 unpaid caregivers, and they're also coming into your library looking for information and for meaningful activities to keep their loved ones engaged. So there is good news, however. Even though there's no pharmacological cure available for the epidemic, the 2018 World Alzheimer Report says we may not yet be able to cure dementia, but we may be able to stop people getting it in the first place, and at least it looks as though we can delay its onset. There are 3 pertinent areas of non-pharmacological interventions that the medical community is coalescing around that have positive effects for brain health and thus the possible prevention or delay of dementia. Healthy lifestyle choices include better diet, regular cardiovascular exercise, good sleep hygiene. This is good recommendations for all of us. And anything that is good for the heart and emotional health is also good for the brain. Mental stimulation fosters neuroplasticity or brain growth actually throughout our lives, including any kind of active participation in brain training, puzzles, creative engagement, learning new learning new languages, learning musical instruments, really any new skills and mental stimulation can foster neuroplasticity and protect the brain. And social stimulation helps brain health when we develop our social networks or connections socially to our culture. And of course, these are right in the wheelhouse of what librarians do every day. Mental stimulation through lifelong learning and interaction with our materials and our exhibits, and social stimulation through our adult programming are mission central. So in my colleague Mary Beth's words, we can be an essential part of the dementia care team, and many areas of our professional practice can impact those living with dementia. Today, we're going to share with you some ideas about staff training for communication and customer service, some things about literary activities and collection development, and other forms of adult programming. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Beth.
I think I have control. Okay, so let's see. People receiving a diagnosis of dementia feel stigmatized almost immediately. They don't feel welcome in the places where they used to go and feel that they're now treated as the other or less than. Even friends and family sometimes don't know how to deal with a diagnosis and frequently withdraw. Misunderstanding of the nature of dementia and misconceptions about how people are affected abound. As librarians, we know that the best way to counter stigma, stereotypes, and misconceptions is through knowledge and understanding. The place we need to start is within our own libraries. I would like to suggest that dementia awareness training be offered to the entire library staff, from the trustees and administrators to frontline reference and circulation staff, to those working in tech services and even maintenance and security staff. Every employee in a dementia-friendly library should have a basic understanding of what dementia is and how best to interact with those living with dementia who come into the library. The ultimate goal would be to define a welcoming philosophy of service for all library staff. Now, one of the gold standard for care for persons with dementia that's emerging is called person-centered care. I would like to suggest this as a possible model for a philosophy of service. Key points include treating the person with dignity and respect, understanding what makes them unique, trying to put yourself in their shoes, giving them opportunities for conversations and relationships, and ensuring that they have chances to try new things or take part in activities that they enjoy, like reading and going to the library. There are a wide variety of resources for training information. The seminal document for librarians is the Guidelines for Library Services to Persons with Dementia that was developed by the International Federation of Library Associations, or IFLA, in 2007. You're probably aware of numerous dementia organizations such as the Alzheimer's Association and the Alzheimer's Disease International that provide educational opportunities. All of these resources are listed in the handout that you will be getting after this session. I would like to focus now on two resources, though, that might be especially helpful. The National Network of Libraries of Medicine is currently wrapping up a grant on the topic of dementia awareness training. 2 online webinars have already been archived. Links to these free resources are included in that handout I just mentioned. I'd like to tell you about a fairly new nationwide initiative called Dementia Friendly America, or DFA. There are now communities in 38 states across the country moving toward becoming dementia friendly. This is a collaborative effort uniting all aspects of a community, including government bodies, first responders, businesses, faith communities, legal and financial services, health services, and community organizations. And libraries are recognized as an important part of the collaborative efforts of dementia-friendly communities. However, at this time, no communities in Vermont have joined this movement, but there is some discussion at upper levels of the state government about remedying this. DFA includes a sector guide for libraries outlining a wide variety of ways that librarians can add value to the dementia-friendly movement, and the link is also in the handout. Now, the reason I'm talking about DFA under this training section is that one of the arms of DFA is called Dementia Friends USA. They offer a 1-hour in-person dementia awareness training session, I believe at no cost. They use a defined curriculum that could be useful for an all-staff dementia awareness training session. Since the advent of the pandemic, they are now offering these training sessions as live Zoom meetings. This is another reason for Vermont to join the DFA movement so that this training could be made available to your library. So I'm going to move on to some communication techniques. There is really nothing unique or mysterious about how to communicate with those living with dementia. I mentioned those IFLA guidelines earlier. Here's a list of best practices that they have identified when working with those living with dementia. I'm not going to go over all of them. You can read these at your leisure, but they're things you already know, I imagine. Because actually all we really need to do is to tweak the standards that have already been established for conducting reference interviews that have been codified in these standards published by RUSA. Ooh, what happened? I've lost the screen.
Sure.
Are you able to, should I reshare?
Please do.
Okay, might take a second, sorry.
No worries.
It's reloading slowly.
Of course, no worries.
Okay, so Mary Beth, do you want to take control? You see the spot?
Yeah.
And now we're back at slide number 1.
All right. So we're going to go quickly. Okay, so these are those RUSA guidelines, the Reference and User Services Association of ALA. So these standards correspond almost completely with suggestions from those working in the field of dementia. So visibility and approachability, interest, listening and inquiring, all the things that we've been doing as librarians are things that they recommend that we do for those who are working in the field. So using welcoming body language and giving them your full attention are the same in all of these lists. Probably the most important difference is setting a slow, calm pace for a conversation. It's recommended that you wait for 10 seconds before expecting a response from someone living with dementia. And that's not just counting to 10, but counting 1001, 1002, etc. Now, this may seem awkward, but it gives them a better chance to process what you said and to formulate their own response. Another important difference might be to accept their reality and not try to correct their mistakes. Also, to use their verbal and nonverbal cues to listen for emotional content. Those free NNLM webinars that I mentioned earlier provide information about communication, including a brief video that demonstrates good and bad practices in action. I'm going to turn things over to Timothy now.
Thank you, Mary Beth. A few words about reference services, then, information considering the communication needs that we have here. As far as our actual providing of reference and information services, both medical science and our own field have, as Mary Beth pointed out, become more user-centered and proactive in shaping our understanding of information needs. So the distinct categories of information needs that we need to think about for the reference desk when considering the dementia community will be medical information needs, financial information needs, legal and ethical information needs, and information for the emotional side. Health information has long been understood as the largest information need among older adults in general, and the importance of health and medical information is more acute even for the older cohorts, such as those 85 and older. Any kind of serious diagnosis will intensify one's information needs. Cancer information seeking, for instance, has been studied at length. Cancer information overload is even a thing. We do know that older adults do use online sources at a higher rate than previously expected of them, and even social media as sources for health and other information. When we're thinking about this community, we should keep in mind that mental processing speed has declined for many older people with or without a diagnosis of MCI or dementia. We also need to keep the affective elements of each reference transaction in mind. Engagement with the information instead of mere compliance, and absolutely avoiding any stigma, supporting positive belief systems, and keeping the medical information as always private. Specifically, for those living with dementia, those in the early stages might be anxious and might come to us seeking more information about the future. There's even, and I'll come back to this when we're talking about collection development, there are even those who are experiencing a potential or actual dementia diagnosis whose level of education and cognitive reserves lead them to more comprehensive research into their own disease. On the other hand, since dementia attacks the brain itself, many people experiencing it also may have what is known as anosognosia, or the medical inability to realize that anything is wrong, and so we might be dealing with the caregivers instead. With all that in mind, we're already actually well served in resources for meeting medical information needs. We've got a large number of consumer health resources, both in print and online, your ProQuest and your EBSCO, Medline, giving people help navigating healthcare.gov. We have tools for individual health literacy, and we have more specialized information resources on dementia, which need to be part of our reference process and our collection development. Some of the print resources we have in mind would also include desk reference guides, information on medications, even the DSM-5. And all of these are already part of our reference practice, but we need to think about having them available with specific information needs in dementia on hand. The second most important information need for older adults, including those living with dementia and their caregivers, is financial information. Specifically, two very immediate financial information needs are there. They need to know about managing the monthly finances and about planning for future care. In the case of monthly finances, once again, good, we're in familiar territory. We're already providing resources on personal finances, and maybe we have information and programs in place about budgets and consumer literacy and fraud prevention. The difficulty and notable difference in case of Alzheimer's and related dementias is that the person might not know that the common activities of daily living, such as writing checks, are starting to fall by the wayside. Another very common information need that can arise when dealing with Alzheimer's and related dementias is researching care options as dementia progresses. Part of the reason for the high number of those with dementia living at home is the high cost of residential care. So once again, we have the resources, just have to think about applying them to this specific community. We have resources that are available in our collections, perhaps even in our reference collections if we still have one. We can recommend resources from, say, the AARP.org. The United States government website on Medicare can be helpful. Area agencies on aging can be helpful in winnowing down the list of potential care facilities to think about. And the Alzheimer's Association of the United States has some very user-friendly pages for different aspects of financial information needs. The areas of law and ethics go beyond our capability to advise, as they do with medical reference questions. But once again, we certainly can offer some good resources within this community. We have access through our library, through our statewide networks, perhaps, to print and online resources for legal information and assistance to caregivers with legal referrals. I want to specifically point out the existence of something called a certified elder law attorney. You can find them through the NAELA, the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. These are lawyers who are specially qualified to assist clients with legal issues related to aging, including the special questions of those aging with dementia. We can refer to somebody who knows specifically how to set up a trust for long-term care or how to set up medical documentation that someone facing a diagnosis might need. We might also have access in our library resources where we can refer to templates for end-of-life care, advanced medical directives, and healthcare powers of attorney. It's also the case that those living with dementia and their caregivers might have specific ethical and practical questions about end-of-life care, hospice and palliative care, organ donation, and grief support, even in places where it's legal physician-assisted suicide. It's somewhat less likely that these questions will come to us at the reference desk, but the information need is real, and you can look to, for instance, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization for information needs in this area. And this leads to the basic emotional challenges faced by both the one living with dementia and the caregivers. These emotional needs are going to be huge for everyone concerned. For the person who is living themselves with cognitive decline, the diagnosis is a life-changing event. Behavioral changes, including apathy, depression, disorientation, and agitation, could be common. And the caregivers must manage the manifold concerns of daily activities for their loved one, in addition to watching it happen. Between 40 and 70% of dementia caregivers themselves suffer from clinical signs of depression, higher levels of stress, loss of sleep, and other health effects. The whole family group, the emotional journey of the Alzheimer's family, typically experiences bouts of fear, guilt, anger, mourning, and eventually acceptance. So the emotional information needs of both those who have dementia and their care partners require from us the highest level of customer service, understanding of the situation, compassion for all of the family, and communication skills, as Mary Beth discussed above. In addition, as we're going to see in the next section, we need to have our libraries maintaining an active collection with materials both on dementia and for use with those living with dementia, to foster a climate of emotional support for those living with dementia. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Mary Beth.
Thank you, Timothy. One commonly held stigmatizing stereotype is that people who have a dementia diagnosis cannot read. Research actually shows just the opposite. Michelle S. Bourgeois, a professor at the University of South Florida, states, "All my research demonstrates that people who were literate maintain their ability to read until the end stages of dementia." The University of Liverpool has also found that reading group activities produce a significant reduction in dementia symptoms and make a contribution to well-being. During the early and middle stages of dementia, people remain highly functional in many areas of their lives. Instead of reading a best-selling novel, though, they might now enjoy browsing through a book on a favorite hobby or some other topic that's of particular interest to them. Think back to those person-centered care concepts about what makes each person unique. Literacy activities can stimulate memories and encourage social interactions and conversations. People get a feeling of competence and well-being from doing something that they have always enjoyed. At every session I conduct, I see people experience moments of joy at learning or relearning something new found in a book or on a list of facts that we give them. A new definition for reading may need to be developed for those living with dementia. It's important not to make assumptions based on prior beliefs. Facility staff and even family members are often surprised by the reading ability of participants. A simple invitation to read out loud often produces wonderful results. Don't mistake shyness for an inability to read. Browsing through nonfiction is another successful literacy activity. It's amazing to see them flipping through books on a wide variety of topics and talking with program staff and each other for 20 minutes at a time. You know what? I'm having a technical problem. I'm not getting the screens. Oh, here we go. That was the one I just talked about. The new purposes for reading. If I can move on, stop letting me go. I'll keep on talking.
Mary Beth, sorry to interrupt. I've got the slides. I put it to different kind.
Do you have new purposes, or I would like to have the next slide, 32. 33.
You're on 32. Yes.
I'm on 32. Can you move me to 33?
I'm actually seeing 33. Okay, there's 34.
I'm on 31. I don't know what everybody else is seeing.
Well, I'm seeing 33, but it's
33. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and say what I had to say.
But it's about things you've talked about, like browsing through nonfiction
different
and
types
reading
of
stuff.
literacy materials. So I hope I'm going to talk about what I hope is 33. There are many types of literacy materials that can be used successfully. Short fiction, such as folk tales, short stories, or excerpts from classic fiction, can all be used for oral reading. Nonfiction books, richly illustrated with color photographs, can be selected from both the adult and children's collection for browsing. I have found that the travel theme works well for a wide variety of topics, including geography, history, culture, sports, art and architecture, and cooking. Local history is another popular topic, and it gets participants remembering and eagerly talking. Gary Glazner of the Alzheimer's Poetry Project advocates for choral reading of poetry, along with what he calls the call and response method. Typing out the lyrics to songs in a large font makes it easy for participants to sing the whole song and not just the chorus. Word games are another way to encourage participants in a literacy activity. I'm getting a message saying page unresponsive, so could someone else take control and forward the screen, please?
I'm forwarding for you, Mary Beth.
Okay, so we're at 34.
That's correct.
Sorry. Okay. Another way to reach those living at home is through circulating kits that caregivers can check out and share with their care partner to give them a stimulating and enjoyable experience at home. These kits can also be used by activity directors from facilities to conduct programs in their own buildings. Each library can develop kits that are tailored to the needs and interests of their own communities, and they don't have to be expensive. This is an example of a kit developed by the Gail Borden Library to expand the reach of their Tales and Travel program. The next slide, the St. Charles, Illinois Public Library debuted its caregiver kiosk a few years ago. Each kit is themed to spark memories from earlier days. For example, Laughing with Lucy includes 2 seasons of the I Love Lucy TV show, a coffee table book about the show, and a music CD with songs sung by Desi Arnaz. Other kits focus on topics such as Chicago sports, Old West TV shows, and U.S. national parks. Moving on, Taisha Shea in Springfield, Missouri, wanted to expand the outreach to more facilities, so she found a local organization to donate funds to create 25 thematic ready-to-go kits. Based on their popular Stories for Life programs, these kits contain books, DVDs, music CDs, games, and tactile or sensory items that support each kit's theme. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Timothy.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And some suggestions for collection development as we think about the IFLA guidelines to have materials for staff and for caregivers and for those who are living with dementia themselves. Some of the best information that we can offer both those with cognitive impairment and the caregivers and ourselves is a set of nonfiction resources on our shelves with emphasis on the scientific understanding of the disease, its history, and its progress. I encourage you to become familiar with some of these yourself to know more. There are a couple bibliographies that I've put together and have linked on the slide with nonfiction resources dealing with the science of dementia and potential prevention and mitigation. Just a couple to mention. I've put up the cover here to David Schenk's Alzheimer's Portrait of an Epidemic. This is a classic nonfiction treatment from 2001. It was made into a film, and it's a good, if frankly heart-wrenching, introduction to the human experience of dementia. It's a good place to get started if you would like. You might be interested in Nikki Kapsambelis's The Inheritance, a family on the front lines of the battle against Alzheimer's disease. And there are works by Oliver Sacks, the best-selling psychologist, writer on psychology and cognitive disorders, who has contributed articles specifically to Alzheimer's as well. You could look into his Awakenings, which talks about dementia through Parkinson's, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and Other Clinical Tales, Musicophilia, Tales of Music and the Brain, and his posthumous The River of Consciousness that just came out in 2017. There's also, since around 2017, 2018, a proliferation of lifestyle and prevention books released by major presses, even starting to come out with books by celebrity doctors such as Richard Furman, who has out a Defeating Dementia from 2018. Your prevention and caregiver collection certainly should start with the 48-hour day, but can move into things from psychology, social sciences, medicine, religion, and spiritual practice, especially mindfulness practice. And I just misspoke. That should have been the title, The 36-Hour Day. However you're reading it, it's a handbook for caregivers on how to fit too many hours into the 24 hours of the day. Do check out the links to the bibliographies. Keep an eye on your own new bookshelf and think about what you can add to your collection in the nonfiction side for all of us to know more. Another kind of literature that can be of great benefit, especially to caregivers, are memoirs of those who have lived with loved ones through their dementia, and other literature from writers who are offering their experience and their wisdom back to the community through the craft of writing. Since Alzheimer's and other dementias came to more popular awareness in the 1980s and 1990s, there have been a number of strong memoirs written about a wide variety of families and situations. So both for our own edification as staff and for meeting the needs of our customers with cognitive impairment and their caregivers, we probably have a lot of books already available that we can get for our shelves or for our ebook collection. In the memoir literature, I just wanted to mention a couple of the best, in my opinion, which include Jonathan Kozol, K-O-Z-O-L, The Theft of Memory. These are again linked in the bibliography on the slide. The Theft of Memory is an articulate father-son dual memoir. Kozil and his father are both clinical psychologists, and his father received a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And so both of them are intelligently thinking about the initial stages of the disease and what to expect from that. Kathy Borey has a memoir called The Long Hello, Memory, My Mother and Me, which is a painful and honest, but also uplifting reflection on the pain and sacrifices that this woman made as a caregiver. She shows us both ends of the emotional spectrum. Her recipe for sleep is, and I quote, 2 glasses of a favorite red wine, 2 bars of dark chocolate, and 1.5 sleeping pills. But she also has some brilliantly clear moments of the joy of her relationship in caregiving. Most of the memoirs that you find will be either from a child or the perspective of a spouse. You can increasingly find some memoirs from people in the sandwich generation, as it's called, people who are caring both for younger children and an aging parent at the same time. There even exists a masterful set of first-person memoirs from people diagnosed with dementia. These are people with strong levels of education and the level of cognitive reserves I mentioned earlier that are necessary to continue higher order brain functions like writing a book. I can recommend Greg O'Brien, a book entitled On Pluto. O'Brien is a journalist by trade, and he says that he's going to become an embedded reporter into dementia as he receives his own diagnosis. And he takes 6 years writing the book as he is reaching for what he calls the paper clips of his mind. And he thinks about the experience of his own, what is going on in his own mind. Gerda Saunders is an anthropologist who has written a memoir called Memory's Last Breath, and she calls this field notes on her dementia. It's a no-holds-barred look at the phenomenon of dementia, but also what it's doing to her family and how she sees the relationships playing out. Joy of being alive, but also the challenge of facing this with her family. And I have up here on the screen an NHS worker named Wendy Mitchell, entitled Somebody I Used to Know. She faced early onset Alzheimer's and wrote an activist memoir, continues to speak on this topic, and gets interviewed a lot on how it feels to be still human with something like this going on in her brain. There's also a number of fiction books for all ages that we can recommend. There are picture books, such as the striped shirts and flowered pants that you see there. Most of the picture books published for this community are going to deal with young children and grandparents. But there are also some that can be used by adult children or spouses. There's an interesting group of books called two-lap books, which are adult picture books written for a caregiver and someone living with dementia to read together as part of a literacy activity, as Mary Beth mentioned. There are Alzheimer's novels with teen protagonists, such as Stefan Merrill Bloch's The Story of Forgetting, and the Newbery Award winner recently, Mercy Suarez Changes Gears. There's even a graphic novel entitled Tangles, a story about Alzheimer's, My Mother and Me, which can appeal to young adult, teen, or older adults who are dealing with a parent. There are, in fact, adult novels of all kinds of genres that we can recommend to people who know someone who are experiencing dementia, who are living with dementia themselves. I can particularly recommend a book by Samantha Harvey entitled The Wilderness. This is one of the best literary fiction approaches to dementia, in my opinion. The story is told from the first person, and the narrator is thus trying to get inside the mind and struggling to locate words and letting the life story unfold with flashbacks and memories, but kind of divorced from linear time and questioning whether the memories are trustworthy and to what extent. There are African American novels such as Tyora Moody, When Memories Fade. There are romance novels which you can recommend in this area. Sally Hepworth, Barbara Delinsky, Karen Kingsbury all have some. You can find thrillers, Dave White, The Evil That Men Do, even sci-fi involving Alzheimer's and related dementias. The most important recommendation is, as Mary Beth has said, to consider the needs and interests of your users and the individuals, and know that you can find things to put on your shelves and put in their hands to meet a diverse range of reading styles and information needs regarding dementia. Now we're going to get into some programming options that serve the needs of those living with Alzheimer's and related dementias, thinking always about mental stimulation and social stimulation. Turning first back over to Mary Beth.
Well, thank you, Timothy. I hope you can see the screen about Tales and Travel. Is that where we are?
That is.
It is, okay. My focus has always been on the person living with the disease and how to make their lives as meaningful and as joyous as possible. So I've mentioned Tales and Travel several times. This is the book and reading program for people living with dementia that I started in 2008 as a volunteer at a memory care facility. In 2011, I began partnering with the Gail Borden Public Library in Elgin, Illinois. And the program has expanded over the years with grants, awards, and a number of conference presentations, journal articles, and book chapters. But the purpose of Tales and Travel has hopefully remained the same. Tales and Travel is not a passive program. It was designed from the beginning to get participants actively involved in the sessions. Excuse me. In a way similar to art and music therapists who use their specialties to engage people living with dementia, librarians can use literacy activities as a vehicle to encourage active participation. Now, we all know that it's helpful to engage all of our senses when participating in a cognitive activity. I want to suggest that a book is a terrific manipulative that stimulates memories and prompts conversations. The ultimate goal is to provide an enjoyable experience that promotes feelings of community, acceptance, and competence. So, how does the Tales and Travel program work? It's important first to build trust and rapport with the participants. So going back, I'm so sorry. Going back to our conversation about communication, body language is very important. So we greet each person as they come into the room by smiling, looking them in the eye, introducing ourselves, and asking their name, getting down to their level if they are seated. It's best to speak clearly and just a little slower than normal. Be sure to give the person extra time to process what you've said, up to those 10 seconds I mentioned earlier. This will give them time to formulate their own response. Be sure to be an active listener, giving them your whole attention and listening for the emotional cues that they may be sending. Many of these tips are included in the Tales and Travel checklist that's listed in the session handout. So then, we show them the destination individually on a globe or a large map. We always see people at tables pulled together or in a U shape so that they can see each other and the books can lay flat. Now that eliminates the problem of holding a book and makes it easier for them to turn the pages and examine the pictures and the text. We then invite them to take turns reading out loud from a folktale, legend, or myth associated with the chosen location, in this case, Mexico, often taken from a children's folktale collection. But we retype the story in large font to make it easier to read and to maintain their dignity. Many people can still read and do so with gusto. Those who don't choose to read aloud follow along with the printed text or listen quietly. We also share 5 interesting facts with them again inviting them to read them out loud. We often hear comments such as, "I didn't know that," or "Isn't that amazing?" We then distribute books, carefully selected from both the adult and children's collections, for them to browse through. The most important criteria is that the books be richly illustrated with color photographs. Here are some examples from the adult collection. Coffee table books. Children's books are readily accepted by the participants when they are chosen to respect the dignity of this adult audience. Those individuals further along in their disease process might enjoy books at the primary level. Colorful photos, increased white space, and large font make these books appealing. Supplementary materials include music, souvenirs or artifacts from the destination, coloring pages, and food when approved by the facility. These materials make the program multi-sensory. As they browse, library staff and volunteers circulate among the participants, engaging them in conversations. Often participants want to talk about memories from their own lives stimulated by the book's contents. This type of socialization is an extremely important part of the program. There is a Tales and Travel website that provides librarians with a free toolkit to replicate this program in their own communities. It includes a video of the program in action, as well as 12 excursion guides and 31 stories from different countries made freely available through a Creative Commons license. But how can librarians provide meaningful programs for those large numbers of people still living at home? Memory cafes are one answer. These are social gatherings for those living in the community who are usually in the early or middle stages of their disease process, and they are often accompanied by a family member or a care partner. These cafes serve as places to have fun, find support, make friends, and share experiences. People living with dementia often experience great social isolation, and memory cafes have proven to help break that isolation. Libraries are great places to host memory cafes. Here are two resources that I'd like to mention that you might find useful. The Percolator Memory Cafe Network, which is in Massachusetts, is actually becoming a nationwide leader in this field. Their website provides toolkits in both English and Spanish, and their archived quarterly meetings are terrific resources for anyone wanting to start a memory cafe. There is a memory cafe directory, and there are 4 Vermont memory cafes listed there in the cities of Barre, Bennington, Burlington, and Rutland. Here's an example of a successful memory cafe collaborative. At the Library Memory Project, 8 public libraries in Milwaukee and Waukesha counties of Wisconsin have formed a partnership to take turns hosting a monthly memory cafe. Here's another photo from a memory cafe at the Denver Public Library. As you can see, these involve a lot of fun, laughter, and even dancing. I am a snowbird, and I spend my winters in Arizona and my summers in Illinois. In 2017, I started bringing my Tales and Travel program once a month to the Memory Cafe at the Tempe Library. Recently, I was invited to begin presenting the program at the Sun Lakes, Arizona Memory Cafe. Both cafes meet weekly, and after an initial joint gathering for coffee, the attendees break into 2 groups. Now, I only go once a month. One of the groups is a support group for care partners, and the other is an activity program for those living with dementia. So care partners can choose to stay with their loved one for the activity if they prefer, but in reality, only a few do that. Many choose to participate in the support group. As I understand it, though, each memory cafe can decide for itself how it wants to operate. The 10P program usually has an attendance rate of 50 to 60 people every week, as they did before the pandemic. The Memory Cafe program lasts a half hour longer than my original Tales of Travel program that was at residential facilities. So I had to add some of those additional literacy activities that I mentioned earlier to keep the participants actively engaged for the full 75 minutes. So we have started to add poetry reading, singing songs, and coloring pages, and food, of course. Now, with the advent of the pandemic, memory cafes could no longer meet in person. However, the Sun Lakes, Arizona Memory Cafe quickly pivoted and began offering their programs virtually. I offered to convert my Tales of Travel sessions into an online format. I call this new series of programs Tales and Travel Adventures. Last May, 6 of the regular participants joined me virtually for a trip to Chicago. I used photos that I had taken of the city, and I wrote a simple narration that I invited them to take turns reading out loud. They eagerly participated and had lots of memories to share. The program lasted nearly an hour, and everyone appeared to have a good time. Since then, we have taken trips to Italy, California, and Austria. I'm creating one program a month, and I'm recording them as videos. The sessions are also available in PowerPoint so that anyone can use them for their own virtual memory cafes. You can find links to the videos and the PowerPoint slide decks at the Tales and Travel website under the Memory Cafes tab. Now, Timothy has more interesting ideas to share with you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And once again, the slides do not seem to be wanting to advance. If one of you could take control.
I'll try. Here we go.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oops, going backwards.
The Tales and Travel is ready to export to your library with Creative Commons licenses, of course, and Memory Cafe has the network that will allow you to get connected and get ideas for your programming. But there are other kinds of programming in addition to literacy activities and basic social interaction. One of the most powerful tools for mental stimulation is interaction with music, because music travels multiple different neural pathways, strengthening mental agility and resilience. There's a music therapist who tells us music, and I quote, is generalized throughout the brain rather than localized in one area, which may be part of the reason older adults retain musical information longer and recall musical memories much more clearly than non-musical memories. Music can mitigate high heart rate, music can mitigate blood pressure and help keep off delirium's onset. And there's good research about the impact of music specifically on those experiencing dementia. There are cognitive and emotional benefits from musical memories. Music can give a defense against behavioral and psychological challenges, and even increases in neuroplasticity. There's a program on the slide when you can see it, if you can, or in the handout, called Music and Memory. This is a music therapy program with the goal to stimulate musical memories and positive music therapeutic effects. They use donated phones and iPods, which are loaded with tracks from an individual's past musical life and given to people living with dementia in care facilities. Librarians also can become involved in this program. The Music and Memory nonprofit goes to care facilities. Librarians can become qualified by the Music and Memory program and can use it in outreach. The program will certify the librarians or volunteer staff and will provide tech support, hardware, and copyright question assistance. There is a documentary of the Music and Memory Project called Alive Inside, and there's a clip linked on YouTube on your handout where there's a man named Henry who's frankly completely unresponsive at the start of the clip. They put headphones on him and he literally comes alive. His eyes pop open. He is moving. He is talking coherently. Even after the music has stopped playing, he is discussing the music cogently. For the next slide, any kind of creative engagement, be that storytelling, painting, dance, poetry, or drama, is known to strengthen mental resilience and build a better sense of control over life. And it can even counter depression and behavioral issues. You've heard Gary Glazner at the Alzheimer's Poetry Project mentioned already. There are art therapies which can use mental stimulation and social stimulation to connect people living with dementia to culture and to their caregivers and to personal memories. There's a program led by the Museum of Modern Art in New York City called Meet Me, the MoMA Alzheimer's Project, which tries to use visual images to spark conversations in those living with cognitive decline and their caregivers. Like Music and Memory, the MoMA Alzheimer's Project will train staff and museum staff and docents, or connect them with a local Alzheimer's Association office for that. So they give dementia-friendly tours every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, and by appointment for groups coming to the museum from care facilities. There are docents with special training who lead the tours just on 2 or 3 works of art. It's not educational or informational, but it is working on sparking memories and conversations among the group. It's mostly about the talking. Some of the topics here might include images of America, or portraits, or the city and art, or everyday objects, anything that's representational and can create good conversations between those living with dementia and the docents and their care partners. The next slide is on games and technology, which also can be great tools for non-pharmacological interventions and are especially pertinent to thinking about how we can transform people out of what might seem to be a downward spiral, but give them both mental and social stimulation. There's a misconception that older adults shy away from technology, but record numbers of them already use smartphones, and they're already known to express more interest in health information games, for example. Librarians can also use, for instance, iPads for mental stimulation puzzles and games, both in outreach and in in-branch programming. There's a Central Ohio program that uses iPads in this way. There are assistive technologies which can help older adults not only with mobility, but can add a richer multimedia environment to basic reminiscence and memory therapies. Digital storytelling is one specific technological improvement to the power of stories for sharing and for reminiscence therapy. Some libraries have considered sensory spaces for programming, both for patrons with autism spectrum and for patrons living with dementia. Technology within this kind of room supports either very limited sensory stimulation to calm people, or very active sensory stimulation for different therapeutic benefits. There are other exploratory studies out there looking at the use of mixed reality even to assist reminiscence therapies, a virtual mixed reality aquarium, an interactive movie database, a digital photo book. I encourage you to keep your eyes open to new ways of using technology, because I think this can be some of the future of our dementia programming. The list of possible program ideas could be the subject of a complete separate webinar, of course. I just wanted to end with some of my personal favorites to whet your appetite, including memory connection centers, where, okay, if your public library has developed a dedicated space for a homework help center or a job help center, other centers like that, you can have a similar focus for brain health, with brochures and information about dementia, information about local events and support groups, memory screenings and area resources, as well as displays from the collection for this community. Meditation practice can actually increase brain density, can improve memory, and decrease anxiety. So we could bring meditation programming for older adults to this community. We can think about outreach with licensed therapy animals, or the way that dolls and stuffed animals decrease agitation and can foster social interactions between those living with dementia and care staff. Therapy stuffed animals could be used in-house or added to circulating caregiver kits. Again, the list goes on, and we'll give you some examples in the handout. All of this goes to show that, yes, we have a dementia epidemic, which confronts us with a lot of bad news, but libraries can make a huge and positive impact in this marginalized community. Better communication skills serve these patrons with sensitivity, and our collections, our information resources, and our adult programming can enhance their quality of life and can, in some cases, we hope, even delay the onset of dementia. Librarians can thus realize our potential as partners on the care team and as support for the direct caregivers. Mary Beth has some final words for you on the value of partnerships and some resources specific to the state of Vermont.
Thanks again, Timothy. You did a wonderful summary right there. These are just a couple of slides that are a little more practical as far as how to move forward. I want to point out that libraries wanting to start or expand their programming for those living with dementia don't need to do so alone. You can seek partners from other libraries in your geographic area, as I did in Wisconsin, or from government and medical agencies in your communities that are already focused on providing for the needs of those living with dementia. And here's a few examples listed here. Timothy had mentioned the AAAs, and they are very useful. I just wanted to point out, I did a little research about what's happening there in Vermont, and these are some of the websites that I ran across. There is a 2019 report of the Governor's Commission on ADRD, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, that mentions that Dementia Friendly Vermont support for that. The AAAs, the Area Agencies on Aging, might be especially helpful, especially if you're looking for some funding. In Illinois, the AAAs have been very helpful to us, and they've given us some funding for developing caregiver kits that I mentioned earlier. So again, thank you so much for your patience, especially when we had some technical issues. I hope that you were able to follow. And we appreciate your time and your participation. And I guess now I'll stop presenting and we will turn this over to questions. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you indeed.
Okay, so if Joy is still here, I don't know if she wants to moderate this.
I'm still here. Yes, people can turn on their mics. I think we're a small enough group that should work organically. If not, we can monitor more closely. And also feel free to write in the chat if you have access to it. If anyone's calling in and wants to unmute themselves, *6 will do that. Any questions?
We've given you a lot to think about, I know.
Yeah, this is excellent material, and I really appreciate all the collection development suggestions and the programming things that people can take back to their libraries. I have a question about, or it's not a specific question, but I'm wondering about sort of the nuances of like confidentiality and like how, in terms of customer service, if you suspect that someone might need some of these materials, but you don't know for sure, and how to kind of navigate that. Like when you're doing reader's advisory and that kind of thing.
I'll leave that to Timothy. I have been out of the direct field for quite a while now. So.
I would say here, as with some of the questions of reference and communication, the foundation is what we're doing well already. And I would treat the confidentiality just as I would any other question that comes to the reference desk. The difference in this community is there might be more occasions where I would want to take a conversation a little more out of the public sphere. That serves both the confidentiality, and it also might reduce distractions if I'm dealing with somebody who is, in fact, experiencing cognitive decline. It's part of the communication best practices that you can sometimes have better success with a conversation when you are taking your time to speak and when there are fewer distractions if you want to go sit at another table or something of that nature. That's your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. There are a few questions in the chat now. Is there a resource for adult picture books? Are you able to see the chat?
Yes, I am. That is something that you almost have to take on a publisher by publisher basis. I'm glancing back into my chapter on that because I don't remember the publishers offhand, but there are 2 or 3. One of them, in fact, is called Two Lap Books. There are 2 or 3 publishers who just have been experimenting with that kind of format to have something that specifically you read with the care partner. But as Mary Beth said, and might want to expand, anything in your collection already that meets the interest and reading level and dignity of the individual is absolutely appropriate to be repurposed.
Yes, I've run across some of those small publishers online, like the Two Lap Books, etc. And those are probably for people in the very late stages of the disease. That's my impression of them. They're super, super simple. So I guess I'm still thinking of the person who's in the earlier stages of the disease, who are coming into the library or who want to still interact with a group of people in a memory cafe or whatever. And you would be amazed at how much they know and how much they want to tell you about and how excited they are to be with other people. They really, intelligence has nothing to do with this disease, and many of these people have had extremely, brilliant careers as judges and lawyers and doctors, and and they unfortunately have this illness, but they still have so much to offer. All of us, as all people who are a little bit older, seem to have to offer to those who are younger than them. So the children's collection, you should not be afraid of it. I was a children's librarian, so I think that's why I feel really comfortable with it. There are super terrific books, and I don't think I would offer them the fiction or even the picture books, particularly, unless you were doing a folk tale or they were perhaps reading with their grandchildren or something like that. But preserving their dignity is very important, and they have interest in so many things, and they have something to tell you about what they're seeing too. So I would not be afraid of using what you already have in your collection. You don't have to buy some special book designed just for people with Alzheimer's.
Thank you. And another question is about the kits. Is there an online resource with kit content ideas?
Oh, not really, because what seems to be most effective is what is things that are designed for your community. You know your own population better than anyone. So you might want to go to a support group and talk to some of the caregivers and say, what are your loved ones interested in? Just about anything works. A lot of people want to go back to, decades earlier, what was the 50s like, what was the 60s like, the 40s, or old TV shows and movies. Those are always very simple to do. So it really just is a creative thing on your own part, I believe, to know what your community might be interested in and how helpful that is.
There was a company called Bifocal from which you could purchase these, and I think their website still has some pictures of their kits if you want some ideas. I don't think this is something that you likewise need to spend a lot of money on. I've seen these called rummage kits as well, because you can just go to a rummage sale or into the back of your closet, I suppose, and find things, as long as they are, as Mary Beth said, connected to the interests of your community, and good selection of multimedia for different kinds of stimulation and things to just spark some conversations. Yes, going back to decades, going back to dance styles or music, going back to cars or sports, any of these things could be good ideas.
I will say that the Able Library at the Department of Libraries has done memory cafes, and I know some of those have had like a Vermont theme. So if you have questions about that or want some ideas, you could contact the Able Library, and they might be able to share some of the ideas that they've done. I'm going to go ahead and put the evaluation link in the chat, and I'll send it out with the resources too, but just want to put that in. For wrapping up, it would be really helpful if you could fill that out. It helps for our grant purposes, and just also to always good to get feedback on programs. Does anyone else have any last minute comments, questions?
I believe both of our contact information will be on the handout, and I think both of us would be happy to accept questions afterwards as well, or for those who are listening later.
Definitely.
All right, well, I will send out the slides and the resource sheet. Thank you so much. This was so informative, and I think will be very helpful for many librarians in Vermont. So I especially appreciate that you did some Vermont research, and that was really helpful. So thank you for that, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for helping us do it.